show, radio show, or any other show. So I want to slowly walk you through what took place in Pennsylvania. And this sort of thing has taken place to some degree or another in numerous states. October 2019, 14 months ago, the Republican state legislature in Pennsylvania passed an omnibus bill called Act 77. In Act 77, they included language there changing their election laws to allow universal mail-in voting. The problem is, Pennsylvania, being an old state, having an old constitution, one of the original state legislatures, didn't allow that. There wasn't even early voting in Pennsylvania. The only way you could have a mail-in vote was through the absentee ballot. And you had to go through a process there, a multi-step process, in order to get an absentee ballot. Well, you might say, well, what about COVID-19? In October 2019, there was no COVID-19, was there? There was no virus. This push for mail-in voting has been going on with the Democrats for at least a decade. One of the first places they imposed it was in California, among other things. And they've tried to do this in every state. So the Republican state legislature in Pennsylvania buckled. They passed it, as I say, as part of this omnibus bill, and the Democrat governor, who's a leftist, signed it almost immediately. And in fact, all these statewide offices in Pennsylvania, you have left-wing Democrats in those offices, and you have a Republican legislature. Okay, that's the mail-in voting. What else happened? Well, what else happened was the governor didn't think it went far enough. So he goes to the legislature and he says, you know, the signature requirements, we really shouldn't have that. The postmark requirements, we really don't need that. These other requirements that it has to be in by election day, there ought to be a few more days afterwards where we can count the ballots. The legislature said, no, we're not going to do that. He said, oh, yes, you are. So he winds up going to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has 7 justices. A couple of years ago, they had an election for 3 justices. The Republicans really weren't paying attention to it. The Democrats were. And they backed 3 hardcore leftists for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. Among other things, they were thinking in 2020. The labor unions poured in a fortune. The teacher unions poured in a fortune. The usual group poured in a fortune, and they won all 3 seats. And now the makeup of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as they say, the members are elected, is 5-2 Democrat. And the Democrats, when it comes to election law, those 5 stick together, much like the 3 Democrats and John Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court. So what did those Democrats do? They said, you know what? We have a good idea. A few months before the election, they said, yes, no signatures required. You don't need signature comparison. You don't need a postal date. And if the postal date is smudged, you're to count it anyway. Oh, and yes, even though election day ends on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to extend it to 5 p.m. Eastern time on Friday. They had no legal or constitutional basis for doing any of that. So they violated Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, which leaves the power to the state legislature to make the election. Now let's circle back. Stay with me here. The reason why reporters don't cover this is either they're left-wing or they're too stupid to follow this.